like to lick, after all. With male animals, well, once again, there was masturbation of the animal and licking, but there was also vaginal penile intercourse. So, think of that what you will, but it's relatively normal sexual behavior other than the fact that the participants are of different species. Next, the participants were asked, among those who currently are having sex with animals, why they still do it. And they overwhelmingly cite emotional reasons or reasons of reciprocation in terms of why they still do it. Basically, the most common reasons for men were sexual attraction to the animal, love for the animal, the fact that the animal is accepting and easy to please, and the fact that the animal wants to have sex. All perfectly valid as long as that's true. I'm not going to make any judgment about whether it is or not because I have no evidence to support it. But, at the very least, you have to say that these people think they're doing something good for the animal. And somebody with that motivation is going to have a more difficult time justifying abusive behavior. As for the women, well, they had similar reasons. They were sexually attracted to the animal, wanted to express love and affection, the animal wants it, the animal's accepting and easy to please. The same top four reasons for both men and women. So, say of that what you will, but those are perfectly good reasons. The other reasons which one might think, shyness or wanting to relieve sexual attention, existed to some degree, but were not nearly as prominent as the emotional and physical attraction to the animals. Now we look at a graph which shows sort of a counter-argument to one possible counter-attack that one might make, namely, the idea that people engage in this sort of behavior because they see others doing it, and it's a sort of form of sick peer pressure. But if you look at their actual answers for why they first had a sexual encounter with an animal, there was hardly any mention of pornography at all. I mean, there was a little of that, but mostly these men and women discovered this on their own. Discovered that the animal enjoyed it, presumably, and they weren't forced into it in any way. They weren't even pressured to do it. This is something which came to them naturally. And with women, the same reasoning applies, although because there are less women involved, their more porn-related reasons are more prominent looking in their graph. Well, then the participants were asked what animals are they most attracted to, and of what genders. And with men, the overwhelming majority were attracted to horses and dogs. There was a lot of attraction to both genders or to males among men, compared with, say, their attraction to both genders of human beings. But overall, the most common animals that we as human beings interact with tended to be the ones they were attracted to. And with women, overwhelmingly dogs. Some of them were also attracted to male equines, although whether they could get through the practical problems of sex with one of them is difficult to say. I mean, some of them claim to have done it, but I'm not sure to what extent that is true, just because physiologically it's really ridiculously large. Now we see another look at some data we saw before, only this time it's organized a little bit differently. See, there's some idea that zoophilia is somehow related to repressed homosexuality, or that homosexual behaviors sometimes manifest themselves in zoophilic relationships. And when we look at the data, that's not entirely true, but it is pretty close. There was a lot of homosexual relations with both dogs and horses. In fact, male dogs outnumbered female ones in the list of the sexual partners that these men had. And as for women, well, their inclinations were far less likely to be homosexual. I mean, there was some experience with female dogs, but other than that, it was almost exclusively male. Now, a number of these men have been caught, and some of the women were caught too, but I'll get to that in a moment. And essentially, they were asked to describe what happened to them upon being caught. For lots of them, nothing really happened. For lots of them, something weird happened that couldn't really be categorized. There were a few people who had bad experiences, or, somewhat good experiences in that the other person became interested. But that's it for that. And as for the women, well, of the 11, only 2 of them ever got caught, and those 2 both had bad experiences by it, which makes sense considering that women are supposed to be more proper when it comes to their sexual experiences, at least by society's standards. The men and women here were also asked to describe the other people around them who know about their zoosexual inclinations, and there was a lot of variation in the numbers of people who knew, but most of the men, and some of the women too, had people in their lives who knew about it. And when it came to who they chose to tell, well, quite a few chose to tell their friends, some chose to tell their spouses, other relations were put down too, but essentially they confided this in people whom they trusted. And really, that's a big leap of trust when you come to think about it. I mean, when you think about how maligned this kind of behavior is, the fact that you're willing to tell somebody about it at all shows that you really think they're going to look out for your best interests. So, good on them. The participants were then asked, among those who had told others, what those others thought about that. And it differed from the men and the women. For the men, the main component of it was acceptance and understanding. Of course, they may have told various other people, and as a result, may have gotten different reactions from different people. But there was a lot of acceptance or understanding, a lot of people who said that they didn't really care, some curiosity. There was surprisingly little negative reaction, surprisingly little shock about it. Which indicates to me that so long as one is careful about who they tell, it might actually be a good thing to tell people about it, because after all, they are far more accepting, according to this data, than I thought they would be. Now again, this is a very limited sample, so I don't know how many conclusions you can draw to the overall zoosexual community, but this is encouraging news, and hopefully more exposure will only improve this. The women had slightly worse reactions, but well, not the women having worse reactions, their friends, spouses, whoever they told, had slightly worse reactions, but less of them talked about it, so it's interesting to note that as a percentage, a lot more people became sexually aroused or reacted positively to the women having these zoosexual inclinations, and that may be due to the idea that a woman who's willing to do that with a lowly dog is willing to do that with anybody. But that's obviously not true, and hopefully those positive reactions weren't predicated on expectations of the women's liberality in other areas. A number of people also told their significant others, their spouses, or girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever,